For December 15th will now come to order. Anyone wishing to address the board, if they'll fill out a green sheet at the front and hand to Ms. Williams, appreciate it. Ms. Washington, would you call the roll?
Certainly. Ms. Remark?
Here.
Mr. Hoitzma?
Here.
Mr. Hurt?
Here.
Ms. Lesage? Ms. Benjamin? Mr. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Neal?
Here.
Mr. Fishback? Mr. Bohan? Ms. Washington here. Mr. McGinnis?
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. The approval of the minutes, we don't have the minutes finished yet, so they will be ready for us at our special meeting next week, along with item number 5. Mr. Walton, under new items, would you like to explain for the record your letter to us concerning the first 3 items?
Yes, we had a problem with the News Journal on the two of those 3 are advertised. The other one is related to that, and wanted to put this on the agenda because all the letters were delivered to the neighbors. It was the News Journal part of the notice that didn't happen, and if someone got that letter, couldn't be here next time, wanted to let them have the chance to come and speak. But if no one is here, we would suggest that just be postponed and held when the News Journal ad did run for your next Thursday's meeting. So it's properly advertised. We would suggest these 3 be postponed to that time and date.
A motion to continue. Can we do each
items,
item or individually? Or?
We could do it either way, either call out each number or do them individually.
Okay. Motion to continue item number 4, DEV 2011-096, item number 5, DEV 2011-065, and item number 6, DEV 2011-066, to the special planning board meeting of December 22nd, 2011.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? All right. Okay. Ms. Washington, item number 7.
Item number 7, Land Development Code discussion, regulations related to site restoration fencing requirements, DEV 2011-108.
Mr. Whitenauer.
Thank you. Good evening. Tom Whitenauer, Planning Division. This is a discussion of the Land Development Code relating to site restoration requirements, specifically fencing requirements. This was given to us early last week, and we did a quick read of the 07 ordinance. Some of you may have been on the planning board and helped write. It was a comprehensive look at how sites, and more specifically probably on the east side of A1A, needs to be restored after, in this case, there were hurricanes and demolitions, and how to ensure that vacant lots are seeded to ensure the growth of grass and fence to prevent windblown sand from impacting surrounding property owners. The staff at that time in the Planning Board and Commission, like I said, did a pretty comprehensive look at everything from vegetation, stabilization, fence requirements, the appearance of the fencing, removal of structures, and a maintenance provision. But over the course of time with the economy, some of these fences have lasted longer than they probably were intended to and are showing some real wear and tear. So the assignment to us was really just to look at the fencing to see if we could suggest anything as far as appearance goes, since they have really worn down over the years. These are just a couple of slides. If I could work this out. Is there something to do to turn these new remote on? Switch on the slide. Might be the first one using this tonight. So really just to get straight to the fence requirement, and then I'll turn it over to you for discussion. In 07, Article 8, Section 6 was written, and 6.5 subsection E states on properties located east of A1A, front and rear walls or fencing must be installed. And it was pretty straightforward. The setback along A1A should be 20 feet back where the fence is required. The height must be 4 feet. It's not a maximum or minimum. It just has to be 4 feet on the front and rear. Sides may have a 6-foot high fence. The surface needs to be solid face, meaning not spaced pickets or shadow box or something else, and that's to try to retain some sand. And then the materials only allow wood, PVC, and concrete with a stucco finish. And the last provision of it is everything with the site, including the fence, must be maintained until a building permit is issued and work begins. So when we look at the fencing that exists now out on A1A on the east side, all we really need to do is run through those the criteria to see if they meet the setback, height, surface, materials, and maintenance. And since they all met it when they were installed, they meet all those except the maintenance. Here's a picture of a pretty poorly maintained fence, and then a fence that was pretty well maintained. Last night, the Main Street South Atlantic Redevelopment Board discussed this item. Tracy Remark was here, and Reed Berger ran the meeting, and they may have some comments to add. As far as our quick study of the regulations, it appears to be the maintenance that's in need. The overall ordinance looks like it was pretty well written and instituted. One thing I heard last night that came up was perhaps if the vegetation has taken hold, the fence is in disrepair, there might be some allowance to have them removed. I heard that in the tape I saw last night. But with that, unless you have some questions about the regulations, I'll just have it turned over to you to discuss. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions of staff concerning this right now?
Yeah, I have one. Why is it here?
Why is it here in front of you? Okay, well, that's a good question. It came up as a commission item, I understand.
We discussed at the commission as a concern and
What can we
asking
do?
us all, the redevelopment board, this board, to look at it and suggest to the commission any thoughts about whether there's, how to improve the appearance of the properties, whether it's the code is fine, whether it's just a code enforcement issue, whether maybe the standards should be relooked at, etc. It's not on for an action tonight.
Yeah, because it sounds really more like a code problem than it does anything.
Well, except code had something interesting to say
okay,
about it.
then we'll
It's
wait.
actually more than a code problem. No matter how often, when you see the large sections of it gone, people are just taking it down so they can get to the beach. They're accessing it. Unless someone, yes, you see some areas where you have broken pickets, but what the code officer that was at the redevelopment board, Mike Fitzgerald, last night, said that a lot of it is just people are we want to get through, and they're going through, so whole sections come down. And to keep up with that, that's a never-ending process. What we talked about last night was, number one, coming up with some minimum standards for the fencing. Right now, it's the very cheapest materials, and of course, it's there a lot longer than anyone thought. Plus, they just use nail guns instead of screwing things in, so it's really easy to take down whole sections of the fence. The board had suggested minimum size timbers, so it actually, you can't just pull it off. Standards on how to attach it, what kind of attachment to use, the quality of materials, increasing that a bit more so they don't just break off and split. But one of the things that came up at the board that actually there was total consensus on was the redevelopment board really supports the natural landscape look that has happened behind the fence, and that if there is fencing that needs to be maintained, if it is actually grown in a natural landscape in the back, and it doesn't have any hazards in it, like when you look at the one picture, the vacant lot south of A1A, and you have in our report, you've got all those rebar sticking up out of the cement. But as long as there are no hazards, that if it's grown in and it's natural, that the redevelopment board thought it would actually improve the beachside greatly to actually just get rid of the fences, to be able to see the dune, to see the ocean. You're not going to have, one of the things that was brought up, now that it's grown in, yes, there's still some sand, but the sand now, that if there's enough wind to blow sand, it blows it over the top of the fence anyway. There's no, once it's grown in, there's no sand that's just flowing into the road. We had suggested coming up with an objective list of natural vegetation, and to even possibly give someone the option of doing a more natural vegetation landscaping in there, because the maintenance is such a long-term problem. Xeriscaping as much as possible. And also there was concern, it was discussed, of course, especially during events, people will just start pulling up their trailers and their tractors and all of that, that actually at least keep some post for no trespassing. So it can, once it's posted no trespassing, and violators will be towed, that you still have that. They can contract with a private company, and that can just be called in automatically if anyone is parking where they shouldn't be. So that's what the board discussed last night.
Those sound like some good suggestions.
There were some
However,
really
if I
good.
understand the code as it currently is, I don't see any of these complying. You're supposed to have an appearance fence. You're supposed to also have a sand fence. The property behind is supposed to be sodded.
No, the property in front is sodded. The property behind is seeded.
Seeded. And that's where the problem. And that's
Yeah.
where I agree with what the
Yeah.
board came up with on that part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anybody else have any comments?
Well, I'm kind of surprised that they think that vegetation could hold back the sand blowing, because once the vegetation grows just slightly, I mean, it's got a shot right underneath it, and I thought that's why we put the solid fences in.
Well, when you remember when we did the solid fences, there was no vegetation. If you look behind many of those fences, many of them are fully ingrown now with the natural vegetation, but those were originally demolition sites, the motels that had to be demolished after the 3 hurricanes in 2004, and there was nothing there but sand. And again, they would need to come up with this objective list and an objective look, and we had given staff, some suggestions on that, on determining, is there enough vegetation back there, and does it meet that natural look? Not is it just full of weeds. But so much of it is actually already grown in. There is no sand. Some lots are still half and half, but a number of them, they're all ground cover. There's no sand. It's all taken over with whatever used to grow there when it was actually a dune, because it's been since 2004. So we were thinking where you could open it up, allow that option, either maintain it or allow the option for the property owner to open it up. The other problem code has had with the maintenance issue, and bringing this to code board, every time these properties sell, they have to start all over. And there has been, a fair amount of turnover. Several of these properties are owned by a company in Ontario, Canada. We can't even get service up there. We're trying, and until you can get service, you can't get code. So you have to, they're either dealing with banks when they go bank owned, or new property owners. You can't put a will fine on the new property owner, so it just becomes actually sort of a continuing enforcement nightmare or headache trying to keep up with this, especially because the materials are such. And that's why we talked about establishing some minimum standards if they are going to have a fence. The materials are so cheap, and the way that those fences are put up, anyone can knock it down. And that's what they do. That's when you see the whole big sections down, it's because people have literally taken them down to get through as an access to the beach. Not when you see just little broken pickets. Thank you.
Mr. Hurd?
Well, I think that the standards that I think pretty much everybody was on the board that agreed to, that are in place, that, that leave those in place, like they are. Then if it fills in with natural vegetation, if it's got sea oats or some kind of whatever that's on there, and the fence is in disrepair, then I'm agreeing with her that let the option of removing the fence and letting the grass be there. But I think we could have a book of rules like this, and it's either going to be that someone's went broke and they don't have any money to put into a fence or to repair the fence or whatever, and then I guess it would have to be, which is a bad thing, but a code enforcement thing for them to have to put, a fine onto the property and stay with the property, and then whoever went broke on it and somebody else buys it, they have to clear those up before they transfer ownership. I don't see any other way to do it, because you can't just say everybody play nice, because everybody doesn't play nice. And it just doesn't work. So you put what's practical in there and go and, I don't know what else to say. Because the standards that went in first were pretty good, but we were thinking temporary.
Mr. Fisher.
Yeah, Mr. Remark, did the board have did they lean towards a certain option, whether to knock the fence down or the vegetation? Did you sense any kind of preference, or did it?
Actually, the board would like to see, the redevelopment board thought that it would be much better to see less fence.
Just to knock it down.
Yeah, less fence. And even encourage the property owners to actually, those where it hasn't grown in, it's going to become a maintenance nightmare that you're going to have to keep up. This can be the stick, but this can be the carrot. And especially with, the views that you would have, because there's a lot of open property right now.
But then the challenge becomes, who makes the decision on what natural vegetation looks good and doesn't look good?
No, that's why we were saying establish just like you have right now, if you're a commercial property, for instance, and you're going to do a new development, the planning department, they have a list of what's accepted. You can't just go plant weeds because it's green. There's a list. And since we were in xeriscaping, there's also information on xeriscaping that's actually used, I think, in some of the grant programs for the historic and redevelopment areas. And so if it meets the criteria of what is in that list, natural vegetation is not going to be manicured by any means.
It's like wiregrass and COs.
Right. But it is, because it's natural and because it looks like it belongs there. That's what we're saying. It's a better look than what you have with the fences. So
it doesn't require irrigation.
Right. And the Volusia County Agricultural Center has it. That is very available, and that's actually what Ms. Lathan was saying, as a way to objectify. It can't just be, oh, I think that looks good. It needs to be, this is what's natural, if this is what's there, and if it's filled in, then
Okay, so
this meets the criteria.
So if we follow that criteria, then then the code problem disappears.
No. We can write it all we want to write it, but that don't mean that it's going to disappear if we give you any problem. But it could be
someone who keeps it.
Some of it, but it could be if it's a fence that's in need of repair, and just for example, throwing it out, a figure that 70% of the vacant land, open land, is covered by natural vegetation, and it's not causing, the sand disbursement is what the problem we had before, then they have the option to take the fence down. So.
But that's what we were saying. Come up with something that's objective. It has to be there. It's not just someone eyeballing it and go, oh, yeah, that works.
And then post it for no trespassing.
Right. Keep it posted for no trespassing, and violators will be towed.
Anyone else have any comments?
There's two things I'd like to point out. I listened to the discussion last night, but this code requirement goes citywide. I don't think Mike Works from the north city limits to the south city limits.
We were just talking the east side of A1A.
I understand.
Okay.
But this is the east side of A1A, outside the redevelopment area, is more than what's in the
Right,
redevelopment area.
right.
And I know code enforcement is supplemented by the redevelopment area. So, you know, the more rules and regulations we put in, the more effort there's going to be in terms of enforcing the rules from Ormond Beach all the way to the Daytona Beach shores. The other thing is if the fences come down, and I have seen in many other areas, you've got dumping, you've got trespassing, property owners want something there for security purposes. I don't think we want to prohibit them from having, I know a lot of the discussion last night was it was an option if, and we could do that, but I can bet that many property owners are still going to want some security to keep people from getting onto those sites for dumping, for anything illegal anyway. But
Then it seems like the restrictions of the type of fencing has to be there.
But I thought we were talking about, it could be, like if the fence is in disrepair, they need to repair it. If the fence is in disrepair and the city's deemed that it's 70% covered, just using that figure, if they want to remove the fence without repairing it, then they can. So
that
it's
was
either or.
discussion last
That was,
night.
and they keep it posted.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, either or.
That-
Well, it's posted,
right.
it's supposed to be posted either way,
Right,
where they got a
right.
fence or where there is
Right.
open land, it's
Right.
supposed to be posted.
Right.
So, but give them then the option.
Actually, I think it's more than posting. I think the property owner has to give permission or actually request the police department to have authority to arrest
Well, you
trespassers.
can for
or whatever.
loitering, and then the private property owner, because we do this on our private property, our apartments, you know, you just contract with, let's call it ABC Towing Company, and violators will be towed, and anyone can call that in that sees it. They can call the towing company.
But if they have to request that, when they have to request a permit to put up a fence, so why couldn't that just be one sheet of paper
That's a
added
good
to the
idea.
permit that says, I'm asking for permission to have this towed and whatever, and it's all in one little neat package and it's not in a separate file someplace.
That's a great idea, the loitering,
I talked with code enforcement. They had a concern last night that they need permission from the property owners to be able to come onto the site. I'll have to speak to them
The
as to
property
how
owner's
that.
got to get permission to put up a fence.
Fence
So he could just
initially.
fill that little form out, giving them permission while he's doing his permit.
I'm not sure if that transfers if the property sold. I think that was one of the concerns he was talking about last night, was when the property changes hands, he needs permission from the property owner to
Yeah.
enforce rules on private property.
I don't think we're gonna have a lot of oceanfront change hands shortly. I know that Canadian guy did buy those 3 pieces. And I'm sure he came to the city to see if there were any code violations or anything that he had to clean
Yes.
up. And then so at that time, he could sign a little piece of paper saying, if, you know, I'm going to give him permission to go on.
Just a question. Well, are you saying that if they have vegetation behind it, that they can take all the fencing out, or just
I'm
where
s-
the vegetation is?
I'm saying that if it's pretty much covered, you know, and then it'll keep filling in and filling in. If it's
Right.
got a good start, if it's 60 to 70% covered, it's going to continue to creep, just like St. Augustine. Always on the beach it does that. But I'm saying give the people the option, if their fence is in good shape and they want to leave their fence up because they want to protect their property, and it's 100% covered behind it, they don't have to take their fence down. If they want to take it down, they can. If they
No,
want
I just meant if you had vegetation that takes, because a lot of these, actually a lot of these motel properties are quite long.
Right.
And so I wouldn't want it that they have half of it is not actually beginning to grow vegetation, and you take the whole fence down. No, you don't want to do that. You just take it down in front of the vegetation, don't you?
Well, if they wanted to take their fence down and it was in disrepair, instead
No,
of
I
having to
understand.
repair it. But there has to be some kind of figure that the city would come to after looking at it to say what percentage
Okay.
of the property has to be covered. You know,
Okay,
it couldn't
that's
be,
fine.
and it couldn't be 50%.
No,
you know,
it's
it
gotta
would
be more than that.
65 or 70. You know,
75.
somewhere around that figure, and then pretty much, you know, the rest of it's all going to grow in. If their fence is in such disrepair that they want to take it down, but I think leave it up to the option of the landowner to decide. They can look at it and tell that it's in disrepair, and then they know they're going to come up against a stump. You know, either we're going to fix it or we're going to take it down. So
Any other comments on this? Mr. Nicholson, I'm sorry, I overlooked you. Would you like to make a comment on this?
John Nicholson, 413 North Cranberry Avenue. The thing that was overlooked is this went up, and this was written because those ugly blue tarps, I don't know if you all remember them, the fences were in 8-foot sections, and they kept falling, and it looked ugly. So they came up with this as an alternative. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, nobody expected it to last this long. So if you go up to Flagler and you drive down that and you look over to your east and west, there are no fences. It is an extremely attractive drive. Nobody dumps any trash. Nobody causes any problem. It's an extremely attractive look. That's what we're thinking about here. Like the 1700 block of North Atlantic. There was a mansion there, tore down maybe at the same time. Tracy would remember, it's near her house. But they tore it down. The natural vegetation, it's a high dune. There's a path that people walk to go to the beach. But other than that, there's no trash, no problem. To me, having that ugly white fence is a glaring saying, we were going to put a building here, and now we're on economic hard times, and it's kind of like an in-your-face. You always know that this was a property that we can't sell and we can't develop. With the dunes, it's just a natural attraction. It's attractive. So I'm hoping that you put in something or put into place something that looks attractive, that when people go by, it's an asset. And those fences, they'll come down all the time. You see people kicking those things out constantly. It's not fair to the property owner to have to come down and keep repairing that if there's an alternative. And I hope you go with the alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, John. There's no vote required on this. The staff have the information they need from the planning board. Okay. Moving on to other business. Downtown Blue Road redevelopment. Ms. Washington.
Yes. Downtown Blue Road Redevelopment Committee met. Our one item to vote on, we received our monthly reports, as usual. The discussion was on the rezoning for Williams Square, and the board unanimously approved that. Very simple.
All right. Ms. Benjamin isn't here, so we won't be able to hear tonight the Midtown redevelopment. And Ms. Remark, I presume that you've already given your report.
Other than some updates on redevelopment projects and discussion about, the Holiday on Ice at the band shell. Yeah, that was our report. Oh, and the parking for Joe's Crab Shack, how that had been worked out and what they want to do long term. But that's the report.
All right, moving right along.
Public comments. Mr. Nicholson,
Mr. Public?
I'll get you down.
Mr. Public?
John Nicholson, 413 North Cranberry Avenue. Something came up last night that was sort of kind of hit upon. There is a problem on A1A with the parking. There are certain streets that are in the commercial districts that do not require parking in order to open up a business. There are others like A1A that requires parking. So if you go down Seabreeze, you can open a big business, 10,000 square feet, you don't have to put a single parking space in there. But if you're on A1A, you open up a little space and you've got 20 parking spaces that's required. So it's causing a problem. Many people can't rent their businesses because of the parking requirements. You're required a 10-year lease. So almost nobody in a redevelopment area is willing to give you a 10-year lease and prevent, if something happens in 5 years, they can't develop because this lease is in place where they have to buy them out and it's exorbitant. So that was one of the issues that sort of kind of came up that I think might be willing to be discussed and need to be addressed, because A1A, especially between International and Main Street, is dying. It really needs help, and the parking is a problem for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff, any comments?
We have, Rose left it back in the office, went to get it, the agenda actually for next Thursday's meeting she's going to hand out for you leave, but we also have the staff report, which she does have here for the one item that we're still working on when this went out, item number 4 from tonight's agenda. It's the item number 5, the William Square project. So we'll give you that staff report tonight and that agenda before you leave. And unfortunately, that next Thursday I'm going to be out of town. I had planned to be here until we canceled, moved the meeting, so I made plans to be gone, but staff will be here next week to cover those 3 items at your meeting. I want to wish everyone a happy holidays and see you next year.
All right. Board comments.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Well, I appreciate everyone, the ones agreeing to come back again next week. I think we have 3.
Yeah, the property owners really needed to get these heard.
Get taken care of, and I really appreciate that, particularly this time. And, I wish you all a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, but I'll do the same thing next week, too.
Next week.
Meeting adjourned.
Next week.